Welcome to True Crime with Strategic Eyes.
Strategic back again. What's going on, guys? Now, you guys know I love my country. I'm a big patriot. I love this country. I think this is the greatest country on earth. No other country provides the amount of opportunity, in my opinion, the United States of America does on the scale that it does with the diversity by which it does it. That's right. We are a country of so many different people from different backgrounds and cultures all coming together to create greatness. All these other countries in Europe, all these other places, they're places where everybody looks the same, everybody talks the same language, everybody shares the same culture. That is until recently with this mass global migration. But, 20 years prior, that was definitely true. But that was never true for America. America has always been a hodgepodge stitch quilt of everything the world has to offer. And that's what makes us great, because we all can come together and figure it out. And one of the best things about America is that we're stable. We have our political ups and downs, but we all have one ideal. One ideal, ladies and gentlemen, and that's country first. That is the peaceful handing over of governments from political parties on the left and the right to the next secession, so forth and so on, carrying on the will of the people. We don't have coups. We don't have juntas. We don't have insurrections. I mean, real ones with like pitchforks and guns and stuff like that. We don't have civil wars other than the original Civil War that settled it all. We find a way to make it work. And that's why this JFK story touches me so deeply in my heart. Because to me, in my opinion, it was a moment where our government turned against the will of the people and committed treason. Now, did the whole government do it? No. There was a cabal in this government that didn't like the fact that one of the greatest presidents to ever live was about to fundamentally change this country, fundamentally change this country's foreign policy, remove us from war, a war that almost devastated us. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Vietnam War. Bring racial equality to this country. And that's JFK. And I got to tell you, the fact that we are about to, and I have hope. Some people may not have hope, and I understand why they won't have hope, but I have hope that we're going to find out the details of how, why, and who assassinated JFK. And I got to tell you guys, when you start diving into this, you start realizing that they've lied to us for a very long time. But the funny thing is, they haven't done a good job lying to us. We just haven't had the will to seek the truth. But I think that will has finally arrived. I think we've seen a lot of shenanigans in our government in the last few years that has made us very wary about our government. And it's time that what happens in the dark comes to the light. Guys, I want to share with you some of the things.
Our first investigation will be...
That's going to be coming out there soon. I want you to listen to Representative Anna Paulina Luna as she talks about some of the evidence that's just magically popping out of the woodwork, like the magic bullet that hit like 5 people and 5 objects and happened to bounce into the neck of JFK with the velocity to kill him. Let's listen to what she has to say about this, guys. When the truth comes out, there's going to be a reckoning. I'm going to tell you how I feel about that reckoning in a second.
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you,
she's really good looking. I mean, no disrespect. I'm just saying, you don't often see that with politicians. They're usually super old, super duper old. And she's not. Let's keep going.
Based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were 2 shooters, and we should be finding more information.
2 shooters. 2 shooters. From the things that she has seen so far, that means actual documents that she's read, she believes there's 2 shooters. I've always thought that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. Maybe he was one of those shooters. Maybe he wasn't. But he was the fall guy. I've always believed that Oswald was a patsy.
As we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
And a SCIF is a classified document, basically. I want to show you guys this right here. Look at this footage that occurred at the time of JFK's assassination. Look what his Secret Service agents does right before he gets killed.
Everything seemed normal as the president's Secret Service bodyguards kept their ever-watchful eyes on the crowd. Everything seemed normal as the president's motorcade began its journey.
Killed our president, man.
Everything seemed normal. That is, up until this instant. What took place is so odd.
Look at this. The boss over here tells these agents, fall back. Why would he do that for? Is this boss still alive? Like, if we could take guys to Guantanamo Bay and do kinds of crazy stuff, I don't want to say it because YouTube is crazy. Why can't we do that to this guy? Is he still alive? Is he like 90? He has much less of a tolerance at 90 years old than he did when he was 30 or 40. I'm serious about this stuff. I think that these people who participated in the offing of our president, probably one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, they are treasonous people. They are not Americans. They should have their citizenship revoked. They should be stateless people. And even in a ripe old age of 95, I think they should face the death penalty. I'm sorry. Some people might say, oh, it's too extreme. Let bygones be bygones. No. These guys committed treason against our country. They killed our president. They killed our president. These guys, if they're caught at 95, if this is when we finally get the truth, they need to be plucked out of their retirement homes and they need to be sent to federal prison and they need to be expedited to the electric chair. That's my belief, but let's keep going. Watch this.
That we're going to examine the scene 4 more times.
Called them off. Why would he do that for? What is so special of this strip of road that the boss decided to call these dudes off if the boss was not in on this assassination attempt? Look at this.
Watch the left side of your screen. The arrow points to Agent in Charge, Amory Roberts, as he stands in the Secret Service follow-up car and motions with his hand. What he is doing is calling away the president's 2 most important bodyguards, the bodyguards whose job was to protect the president's back by riding on the bumper of the limousine throughout the motorcade. Watch again as he stands and orders the agents running at the rear of the president's car away. Watch the confusion inside the follow-up car that results.
Because it's unprecedented, guys. This is unprecedented. Nobody understands why he's making this call. It doesn't make sense. It's not how they trained. It's not what they practiced. It's not what they discussed. It was not in the plans. Like, there's a attack plan. It's called attack plan. Maybe back then they had a different name, but whenever you engage in something, law enforcement or military, you're doing a attack plan, a tactical plan. They planned for this. They planned the route. They put who's going to be at the back of the car. These guys weren't exclusive bodyguards to the president. They were chosen, this is your duty today. This is your job today. The point I'm trying to make is that they made a plan. They practiced. They ran drills. This was something that was extraordinary. This is something that was not planned for. This is a call that they don't understand because at the end of the day, they're professionals and they're like, well, this doesn't make sense. Why are you asking us to do something that does not make sense? And therefore, these professionals who don't know what this lead Secret Service person knows, they don't know what he knows. They're not a part of his cabal. They're not a part of the secret government that wants to end John F. Kennedy because they don't want black people to walk around being free, and they don't want the war in Vietnam to stop because that's where the money was. And when I say free, I mean equality. We all know that black people was free at that time. It's just they didn't have equality. They had Jim Crow and all that stuff going on. But I don't even think that that was the big picture. The big picture was the money, was the war. They wanted the war to persist. They wanted Richard Nixon's war to keep going because they were making so much money. They could not allow this man to live because he wanted peace, and peace means no money, ladies and gentlemen. And that same mentality persists to this day. We are always in perpetual war. Either we're fighting the war or we're fighting the war by proxy, sending 80, $100 billion to Ukraine. Why? Because it's big business. Because those bombs means absolutely nothing if they're just sitting in stockpiles in Colorado and Kentucky. Those bombs got to be out of those stockpiles, onto those planes, and dropping on the heads of innocent people. The people don't matter. The stockpiles don't matter. The only thing that matters is the money that changes hands when these weapons of destruction are used, ladies and gentlemen. That's why John F. Kennedy had to die, and his brother RFK had to die too, because if his brother would have took office, his brother would have did two things. Number one, he would have weeded out and found out who was involved with the killing of his brother. And number two, he would have followed in his brother's footsteps, because some people say that JFK was more of the politician, ladies and gentlemen. But when it comes to social causes, when it comes to caring about people, RFK was the better brother. RFK had big plans for racial relations in America. RFK had big plans for peace around the world. And so they wanted RFK dead more than they even wanted JFK dead, ladies and gentlemen. But this is what they did. You see it with your very own eyes. They called off the guards, ladies and gentlemen. They also had credible threats against this president's life that went both to the Dallas PD and to the Secret Service. They ignored all of them. And why? Because you can never have a foolproof cabal. Junta. You can never have a foolproof one. You can never have a foolproof secret. There's always going to be leaks. There's always going to be somebody in the room who's raising their hand. Ah! Down for the cause, down for the genocide. There's going to be one person in that room who's acts like they're down for the cause, acts like they're down for the genocide, but they don't really believe in it. And they do everything they can to try and thwart it. Just like when we see what happened in Germany, how there were so many we can't say the words, but the N words, not the bad one that people call black people sometimes call themselves. We're talking about the guys in Germany. There was tons of those guys who were hiding Jewish people. Tons of those guys who were smuggling Jewish people out of the country. Tons of those guys who were hiring Jewish people to work in factories to protect them. Schindler's List, remember that? That's a true story. There was one guy who was in a concentration camp and he was helping them escape. And then when they got him in the Nuremberg trial, those folks, the escapees, had to come and testify in Nuremberg trial. Like, no, not him. Don't execute him. He's one of the good guys. He saved me and my whole family. And it was dozens, I think it was a couple hundred people he saved. But he was still there, and he oversaw the execution of the people. He could only do what he could do, and he did the best he could. He saved as many people as he could. And unfortunately, some people had to die, but he tried. And he's a hero. He's viewed as a hero now. But there's always going to be cracks in that secret. And I think that there were some people or a person who did not agree with what the CIA wanted to do, and they tried to warn them, but that plan was so ingrained in the corruption of this government, it was so ingrained on so many different levels of our government that they ignored it. And it persisted. The CIA didn't stop it. I believe it was their plan. The Secret Service was in the pocket of the CIA, at least some notable people of power, maybe possibly, I have no proof of it, but this head of this detail here Dallas police was most likely in a pocket of the CIA. They ignored these threats. They led the president into the trap that they created, and they ended the president's life. I do not believe for 1 second that the mafia had the balls to try and take the life of JFK. It was the CIA with multiple patsies, one of those being the mafia, who took the life of JFK, but pinned it on the mafia, pinned it on Oswald. These are all patsies. When at the end of the day, it was most likely special operatives, trained military special operatives that work for the CIA who ended the life of JFK, ladies and gentlemen. And if it comes out that the CIA had something to do with this, it needs to be disbanded. We need to disband the CIA. We need to demolish the building, and we need to start from scratch. And anyone who had something to do with this, who is still alive to this day, they need to be held to bear.
Now watch the right side of your screen. The arrow points to one of 2 agents whose job was to hop aboard the bumper and act as human shields. He's obviously perplexed. Watch as he shrugs his shoulders 3 times in dismay, each shrug more dramatic than the last. As you watch this scene for the final time, ask yourself, is this the kind of conduct you would expect from an agency that routinely sends an advance team to a city a month or more prior to the president's arrival in order to make preparations? Now ask yourself if the assassination could have taken place at all had those men been on the bumper during the motorcade. This is the rear of the presidential limousine. The back bumper is specially designed with a platform on both the right and left sides. There are also handrails on both sides of the trunk. This is where the agent should have been to provide the president even minimal security. The president, unaware of the treachery behind him and the danger waiting for him ahead, continued on to his death.
Wow. Treason, bro. Treason. Treason, treason, treason. I want the truth, ladies and gentlemen, and then I want justice. Only through that process can this country truly heal. And when it comes to Martin Luther King, we'll talk about that in a different video, but Martin Luther King, I believe, was ended by the FBI. The FBI sent him a letter. Martin Luther King, listen, there's evidence that Martin Luther King was a philanderer. I don't care about that, because no man is perfect. A man is a man at the end of the day. That doesn't mean that you have to be unfaithful to your wife, but it just means that you are fallible. You can make mistakes. It's alleged that Martin Luther King liked the ladies. Who am me or any of you to judge? Well, he wasn't a pedo, he wasn't a killer, he wasn't a gangster, he wasn't a fraudster, he just liked ladies. He was also a very popular guy during a time when people loved expressing their loving, their body, the 1960s and the 70s. The FBI used that against Martin Luther King to try and blackmail him, but it did not work. There is a letter that our government, J. Edgar Hoover, the demon that he is, that they wrote a letter to Martin Luther King telling him, hey, listen, if you don't kill yourself, shouldn't have said that on YouTube. You guys know how YouTube is. If you don't end yourself, we're going to expose all of your infidelities, because they were doing wiretaps on him, all kinds of stuff. Listen to his conversations unlawfully, unconstitutionally. They had all the goods on Martin Luther King when it came to his proclivities for loving the ladies. And I think because that didn't work, because Martin Luther King said, yo, do what you got to do. My mission is more important than any of that. Say what you got to say, do what you got to do, but black people need to be free, or rather need to be equal. I think they had to end him too. But we'll talk about that on the next one, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Strategic is out of here. Peace.